I'm Richard, and I want to welcome everyone to our 32nd Lava Salon. We're going to talk about Jean Harlow, and we're going to talk about James Oviatt today. I'm going to just talk a little bit about other lava events just for a minute or two, because I know there are people downstairs waiting for their espressos. How many people went to the Broadway event yesterday, besides Steve and Michelle who ran it? Interesting. Okay, good. It was, they opened up a bunch of movie theaters, so the old movie palaces. It was supposed to be pretty, was it good, Steve? I imagine it was of interest, yes. It was well worth it. What did Steve, they had the Palace, they had the Globe, the $1 Million, the Los Angeles. That's 4. That's good. That's really good. And the Orpheum, of course. Steve Neal opened the Orpheum, yes. So, the Loop. Oh.
No, we're waiting at me.
Okay. Go sit down, we're going to get started. All right, welcome everyone. Darrell is going to talk about Jean Harlow in a second. Let me just take a second to tell everyone about exciting things in the flyer that I spend time making every week, so I bring it to your attention. We have a podcast, it's on the back. Kim, you have a book. It got printed on Thursday. It's going to the binder tomorrow.
That's for the binder, not for me.
Yeah, the binder. The March Salon. The March Salon. Let me get through the salon. So, just looking ahead, February's Lava Salon is Sunday, February 23rd. February's Lava Salon will feature Joe Esterly and Count Smokula. They are going to be together in the first session, and Joe's going to talk about Weird Hollywood, Weird Las Vegas, Weird California, these weird series of books that he does. He's a genius. The Count is going to play us some songs on his accordion, and I'm hoping some Troma film groupies show up, because I just found out that the Count is very much adored by the Troma film scene. The second person speaking at February's Salon is going to be Linda King. Yes, Charles Bukowski's famous former girlfriend, who is the subject of the novel Women, has written a novel. It's called Loving and Hating Charles Bukowski. She wrote it immediately in the wake of the publication of the 1979 novel Women, where she's the central character. And she read the book and she thought, well, this is bullshit. This is not what happened in our relationship at all. I was there. I was the other person in this relationship. So she got all of her letters together and she Xeroxed them and typed them up and put them in chronological order and then wrote little vignettes about what really happened and transpired in between the letters. And so she wrote a real account, her account of their relationship as opposed to what ends up in the novel. And she put it in a drawer. She put it in a drawer, and about 7 years ago, her son, Scott Hall, said, "Mom, I really want you to publish that novel." And she said, "No, I can't." And they just did. So she's going to be talking. She's great. So if you're a Charles Bukowski fan, you should definitely come to the February Salon, because she's going to bring, the novel is all about the clay bust, right? The whole novel's like she's sculpting a bust of him. They're getting along. He has it. They break up. She makes him give the bust back. She's bringing the bust. And apparently some old friends of hers who've had bronze casts of the bust are going to bring their bronze castings of the bust. And I've been told there will be pyrrhic sculptures of Charles Bukowski made by her in the early 70s, mid-70s as well. So it's going to be a lot of fun. March's Salon, Kim, you're going to be, we have two presentation. One is our dear friend Tom Sitton. Tom Sitton is curator emeritus at the Natural History Museum. He's going to be talking about crooked politicians in the city and county of Los Angeles between 1850 and 1950. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be 55 minutes, and he's going to talk about 10 of the crookedest politicians in the first 100 years of the county of Los Angeles, and the same time frame for the city. And I can't do the math in my head and figure out what time frame that is, but 1850 to 1950, county and city of Los Angeles. Kim, you will then talk with the illustrator of your cover, Paul Rogers. You're going to briefly talk about your novel, which is about Raymond Chandler, and the real-life Philip Marlowe, Thomas H. James. And then Paul Rogers, who's a very gifted, famous, and important artist, is going to talk about how he creates his projects. He's going to talk about driving around LA and taking photos on his phone and putting them in his private Flickr feed, and then going back to his workshop and sort of printing them out and pasting them on a wall and thinking about it and how you go from driving around LA to go to a series of 12 prints on taco trucks. And it's going to be very good. And I'm going to stop. We have a crime lab somewhere in the middle there about Clark Rockefeller. It's all in your booklet. Darrell, let's get started. Everyone's here. Come on up. I want everyone to say hello to Darrell. Okay, Darrell, okay, before Darrell talks, I need to properly do my job. Can you hold your book up, Darrell? Darrell and his co-author have written a book about the topic of which we're going to talk about today. So you have copies. You're here.
Yeah.
We're going to take a break between your talk and Mark Chevalier's talk. So you will be here. You have signed copies. A couple?
Yeah, Mark pre-signed all the copies, and then I will sign.
Okay, so your co-author did some pre-signed. Great.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So he's right. He'll be right here. Darrell, take it away.
Okay. First thing, I hate talking into a microphone, so I hope my voice doesn't sound as...
Turn it off and see what happens. Turn it off.
I can talk really loud.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yay! Sometimes it pays
Will you
to
need to be
tell
right
the
up
truth.
here in order to...
What's that?
Are you going to need to be right here in order to deal with this?
Yes.
Then I should go back a little bit.
Okay.
Anyway,
Anyway,
we're gonna move the camera. This is exciting.
Yeah, could you all
Okay.
hold the table back just kind of bit? Much obliged. You don't want me right up your nose, do you?
not really.
No.
Okay, I'll do a song and dance for 15 seconds. How many people have heard of the murderous Louise P? Yay! 1920s. Okay, we're going to do a crime lab about her at the end of the year. We're very excited. We found some really great negatives at UCLA from the Examiner collection. We're going to do an investigator is going to talk about the investigation of her killing spree, which resulted in her execution at San Quentin in 27.
47.
47, that's right, 47. She started in 27. And then we're going to have a forensics investigator do a breakdown of how forensic investigation between 1947 and present day has changed. It's going to be a lot of fun. Cameras move. Let's go. Darrell, take it away.
All set?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Richard.
Sure.
And welcome, everyone. It's nice to see such a large group here. I'm going to talk about Harlow in Hollywood, and this is really a talk about Jean Harlow and the city that made her a star. And it's very much a symbiotic relationship. Harlow first came to Hollywood as an adolescent at a time when Hollywood was in its adolescence. And by the time she passed away, 15 years later, Hollywood was moving into its golden age. So this is a story of how the city affected her and how she, as a movie star, affected the city. Hopefully everyone is familiar with Jean Harlow. She was the blonde bombshell, the platinum blonde. She was the first blonde sex symbol who was a comedian, of which there were many afterwards. She's the one who created the mold. Her first and most noteworthy thing about her was her overt sexuality. If that's all that there was, she would have just been a bimbo and I wouldn't be up here talking. But there was another side to Jean Harlow. She was a happy-go-lucky girl who loved animals, she loved to write, she loved to read. She figured when the movie star thing ended that she would be a writer. So it's this combination, this paradox of two things that makes her a star. Whoops, this direction. This is a map of Hollywood from October of 1937. When Mark Vieira and I were doing the book, Mark's done many books, and so he was the master. I just followed him, and he said, we need something for the inside of the cover called the end papers. New to me, but so he said, I think we should have a map of Hollywood. So I start looking for it, and I find a map, this one, that has pictures on it. It has drawings of the places that Jean Harlow frequented during her lifetime. I thought, oh, this is so much better than just words. The problem was, she's nowhere on the map because she died in June. So, being an artist, I can draw, I could copy that. So I put Jean Harlow back on the map. And metaphorically, that's what I'm doing here. She's a part of the fabric of Hollywood history, and I want to make sure that she reclaims the place that she rightfully deserves. To tell the story of Jean Harlow, you really tell the story of two people, a mother and daughter. Her mother is the real Jean Harlow, that's her name. The daughter, who is the movie star, her name was Harleen Carpenter, and Harleen is sort of a feminization of Harlow, or it's Harlow and Jean flipped around. Her mother was absolutely obsessed and devoted to her daughter, as was the daughter, who thought her name was just Baby for the first 5 years of her life. That's all she was ever called. The thing that's interesting about them, like so many movie stars, she's someone who had a stage number. Her mother wanted to be a movie star. It never happened for her, but it happened for the daughter. And what makes this story so unique is that this girl was so devoted to her mother that she took her mother's name and lived out her mother's dream of being a movie star.
Darrell, you can't leave that photo without telling us about it. You made the mistake of telling me about it.
Very good. This is actually a black and white photograph, and I had it colorized by a very gifted, I'm going to say computer artist, a friend of mine named Victor Mascaro, and he's been doing this for 10 or 15 years, and he's just reached this point where he can make skin feel like skin. There's no way this seems like a black and white photograph, does it? It just seems like the real thing. And somehow, I don't know how he does it, he knows, he can look at a black and white photograph and tonally he'll understand which color it is. This is green, this is orange, so his colors are as true as he can possibly get. Anyway, it's fantastic, and I printed it up 16 by 20, and it's flawless. It's amazing. It gives you a sense of who she really was in color. The mother, Jean Harlow, her married name was Carpenter, Jean Harlow Carpenter, and her daughter came to Hollywood in 1922. At the time, there was no Hollywood sign, and Hollywood was pretty much a series of fruit orchards and small boroughs all strung together with streetcars and roads. And it was in its infancy with the film industry. Silent films were all the rage, and Hollywood was becoming the mecca. And as I mentioned earlier, Jean Harlow Carpenter wanted to be a movie star. In 1922, she comes to Hollywood with her daughter. She's going to crash the movies. Hollywood promises you can reinvent yourself, and that's exactly what her mother wanted to do. Unfortunately, she was too old. She was kind of matronly looking, not photogenic. She'd never actually studied acting at all. So she never got a single job. And that's what she looked like back
With
then.
that hammering, you're going to have to speak it just a little bit.
Okay. Or we can tell that guy who's hammering to stop. Okay, I'll speak up. So this is Jean Harlow Carpenter and her 11-year-old daughter Harleen in Hollywood in 1922. She never got a single job in the movie business. Harleen was so young, but she was up and coming, and it would be a different story for her. Harleen Carpenter was born on March 3rd, 1911 in Kansas City, Missouri, and this is the home she was born into on Olive Avenue. And her grandfather, Skip Harlow, was a real estate developer. He owned this house, and his daughter and her husband lived there, and that's where Harleen was born. This is the only known photograph of Jean Harlow Carpenter and her husband, Montclair Carpenter. He was a dentist, and little baby Harleen. Montclair Carpenter was a very quiet, reserved, very successful dentist in Kansas City, Missouri. Jean Harlow Carpenter was the daughter of a very ambitious real estate developer. He was climbing his way up to the upper middle class, and so he wanted his daughter to marry well and that she would go into society. It's not really what she wanted in her life, but she complied because she lived in the Midwest and it was 1908. Basically their temperaments didn't match, and eventually that would lead to divorce. Little Harleen was extraordinarily photogenic, and she always had this little impish girl charm that never left her entire life. She was fearless in front of a camera. She went to school at Miss Barstow's school in Kansas City, Missouri, And here's a 1920 class picture in the weathercock. And little Harleen is on the top row, center in front of the window. She's wearing the little sailor top. Even back then, she sort of sticks out with her little blonde hair. And here she is this is Robin Hood Day at Miss Barstow's school, and Harleen is at the top of the heap, just with a little feather in her cap. So Jean Harlow Carpenter was very much a modern woman in the early part of the 20th century. She wanted to do something with her life. And for us today, that's a no-brainer. Women they do everything. There's no question about it. But in the teens, it was a different story. There was crazy suffragettes. But she was from the Midwest. She was ruled by her ambitious father, who wanted her to just be a socialite. While she complied, she just didn't fit that mold. And so she would do things like, in 1918, she and another woman joined an organization called the Rose Cross Aid. And what they did was they taught people how to cook nutritiously without meat. So it was all vegetarian food, because it was the war years and food was scarce. Meat was scarce. So she actually went to Washington and had this photograph taken, got all this press, and it was published on March 3rd, 1918, which is ironically little Harleen's 7th birthday. Montclair, as I said, was just a very mild-mannered dentist, and he put up with his wife's pushing the boundaries for about, 12 years. Some of Harleen's school friends knew that Mrs. Carpenter would have what they called beaux that would come over and visit in the afternoons, and sometimes she would receive them in a negligee. So she was a modern woman. She wasn't happy in her marriage. That didn't stop her. Eventually, this started to affect his practice. They arranged for a divorce, and as was the custom of the day, Jean Carpenter was given full custody of her daughter, and I think $200 or $250 a month, which was like a crazy sum of money back then. I'm amazed. Jean Carpenter, of course, had a pretty intense temper. She was so angry with Mont after all these years that all the pictures she had of him, she ripped his head off. And this is a picture of little Harleen and Montclair in the backyard of their home on 79th Street. So she's divorced. She's got a monthly income. What does she do? She hops on a train and heads to Hollywood, and she's going to reinvent herself as a movie star. She takes her 11-year-old daughter, Harleen, with her, and the first thing that they do is they rent a room in a boarding house at the corner of Olympic and Gramercy Place, 1015, I think it's South Gramercy Place. And this is right on the corner. This is Harleen, 11 or 12 years old. Still there? It is not there, unfortunately. I've done my homework. But this is what it looked like in the 1980s when someone else that I know went there. And I bet that palm tree on the right is exactly the same palm tree as that one right there. So I went there in the last couple of years, and there's just a garage there now. So time marched on in terms of that. Harleen was enrolled in the Hollywood School for Girls on La Brea Avenue. And this was a progressive school, in the 1980s when, kids would go into French immersion schools and things like that. This was the kind of school that a lot of movie people were sending their children to. It was very small and very tailored to creative interests. A lot of her schoolmates were the children of Cecil B. DeMille, the mayors, things like that. This is a volleyball photograph from 1924. Harleen is on the top left, second from the left, and at first what you see is that mop of huge blonde hair. I'm sure she was the envy of all the girls there. The other thing that I find interesting about this photograph is that Harleen has reached over and she's touching the shoulder of one of her friends, who just happens to be Catherine DeMille. What's interesting to me about this is that this is behavior that's very typical of this girl for her entire life. She always needed to touch people. She was very tactile. So, you can sort of draw your own conclusions about what that means, that she needs to touch people because she needs to know she's connected. She just, requires human warmth, whatever it is. What's clear is she's just very, very warm and tactile person. Harleen wanted to be in the drama class really bad, and they only had 14 girls in her class, and they didn't want her in the drama class, which is sort of ironic since she ended up in the movie business. Ultimately, she got in and she played a fairy child in this 8th grade play where she didn't have to speak, so her Kansas City accent wasn't the problem. She just had to get up and dance around on the stage. As she grew up into her teenage years, she began to blossom, and this is another photograph that's been colorized by my friend Victor Mascaro that really gives you a sense of this girl with, I'm going to use the word allure, which is never ever used anymore, but this is a girl who's got something going on that's just very magnetic. Her grandfather, Skip Harlow, was not happy with the way that Jean Carpenter was raising her daughter. They moved from one apartment to another, and he felt that this is not the way a society girl should be raised. There was much too much of a nomadic life. And so he demanded that Jean Carpenter bring her daughter home to Kansas City, which she did in 1925. She went to school there for about a year, and then in the summer of 1926, she was sent to a summer camp in Lake Michigan, which is where these photographs are taken. And first, let's see, this photograph on the right, the second girl on the right, that's actually Harleen. They look like a bunch of boys. And it's because the girl in the middle, I think her name is Virginia Lewis, she got it in her head that she could cut everyone's hair. So she did. She cut everyone's hair except her own. And when Jean Carpenter came to visit, she was furious that all of Harleen's beautiful hair was cut off. And Virginia thought, what's the problem? I left all the curls on top. So she was not a fan of Jean Carpenter's. The other thing that's very important that happened at this time was that Harleen, when she first arrived at the camp, she got Scarlet Fever along with 2 other girls. And so they were quarantined. Jean Carpenter, of course, comes in immediately to take care of her. She didn't want medical attention. She could take care of her baby more than anyone else. And the doctor, or the nurse, I think, who was on call, warned her about this, that scarlet fever, can have a lot of repercussions later in life. And so I'm just going to telescope this down really quickly. What ended up happening was that Harleen did get a post-streptococcal infection called glomerulonephritis that would haunt her for the next 10 years of her life. This is something she didn't know, but basically her life is like a ticking time bomb. So she's cured of it by her mother. Another thing that bonded them together, my mother saved my life. This is Jean Carpenter in 1926. She enjoyed going up to the Michigan area because she would pass through Chicago, where she had caught the eye of a man named Marino Bello, who worked at the College Inn and Hotel Sherman. This is 1926, and Rudolph Valentino was all the rage, Latin lovers, and Marino is an Italian, swarthy, kind of oily guy who is very hands-on, very Italian, and they begin an affair, they fall in love, and they marry. First he has to divorce his other wife, and then they get married. So Jean Carpenter Bello, I'll call her Jean Bello from now on, enrolls Harleen at Ferry Hall in Lake Forest, Illinois, so that she can be nearby. And they start their own little family unit now, Marino, Jean, Bello, and little Harleen. Harleen, in movie magazines, was always described as not being boy conscious at all when she was a teenager, and nothing could be further from the truth. She was notoriously always eyeing boys and being trained to look for a millionaire. This is what a lot of her high school friends remember, is that her mother was basically priming her, you're not going to just marry any old guy, you're going to find a millionaire and marry him. And she did. This is Harleen's engagement photograph from 1927. She's 16 years old. On the left is Charles Fremont McGrew III, who's the son of a millionaire. They had died in a boating accident, and he was being raised by his grandparents, and he was coming into his inheritance that November. He's 21, she's 16. Love at first sight for both of them, and they just could not wait. And Jean Bell, of course, thought it was a good match because he was rich, to ensure her future. She was just concerned because Harleen was so young, but Harleen could not wait. And so they went to Waukegan one night in September 1927. She gave her age as 19. She looks 19, and they were married. So Jean Bell just, what can she do? She has to just let it follow its course. So Harleen did not like the cold winters of the East Coast. She wanted to go back to Hollywood. And Chuck was fine with this because his grandparents actually owned a home on Arden Boulevard, Arden Avenue, which is Hancock Park area. And I don't know if it's the same house that's there, but there's an old house in that spot, which I forget the address right now. So that doesn't help you, does it? Anyway, so in February 1928, Chuck bought Harleen this house in Beverly Hills at 618 North Linden Drive. The house no longer exists. It was torn down, I think, in the 1940s, and a new house is up there. But here it is, February 1928, and she is just shy of being 17 years old, and she's already a Beverly Hills trophy wife. She's got nothing to do all day. He doesn't need to work for a living. He likes airplanes and alcohol. So, they have lots of parties. And that's a lot of fun for a while. She started to get bored. One of her friends is a starlet, Rosalie Roy, up on the left corner. She's 17 years old, and she's working at Fox Films. She needs a ride to Fox Film one day. Harleen's got a car and plenty of time on her hands. So she said, I want to see what it's like inside a movie studio. I'll take you. So she does, and Harleen walks out like the proverbial Cinderella story with letters of introduction to central casting. The casting directors saw her there. The hair, the body, the lack of underwear, and just thought that she is somebody who would photograph extremely well. Harleen is somebody who didn't like to wear a bra. She found it binding, and she was adamant about it. So in certain ways, she was a very modern girl. The bottom left is the Christmas card that Harleen and her husband Chuck sent to Rosalie Roy in December of 1928. And things like that are actually on exhibit at the Hollywood Museum, which is the old Max Factor building in Hollywood. I have an exhibit of Harlow memorabilia there. So you can certainly go there and check the stuff out in person. So Harleen started having headshots, and you can see that she's just this blonde glamour girl. She does extra work, and it's all just a game. It's not particularly important to her, but you can see she stands out in a crowd, and it's that same thing where she's at the top of the heap. There's something about her sex appeal. It's very obvious. She has skin that photographs like skin, something that rarely happens to actors. Marilyn Monroe is lucky, and that's part of her allure, is that her skin photographs like skin. So Harleen, her marriage is not doing that well. Chuck drinks too much. He becomes abusive when he's drunk, and she's out on movie sets all the time, which he doesn't like. So her mother, Jean Bello, and Reno moved to Los Angeles, and they move into this house. They rent it, and this is at, I think, 600 South Maple Drive, Beverly Hills adjacent. Right on the corner. The house is gone, unfortunately. Another one of those McMansion tragedies. This is Harleen with a friend standing in the front yard of the house. She missed her mother. Her mother comes to Hollywood so they can be together. She finds out that Harleen's dabbling in the film business, and all of her personal ambition she transfers to her daughter. I couldn't be a star. I'm going to make you a star. She was the perfect stage mother. Eventually, Harleen is offered a 5-year contract at Hal Roach Studios in Culver City. Here's the studio in the late 1920s, and unfortunately the studio is now gone. The only thing left is a marker, which thank God it was put there in the 1980s. In this picture on the left, this is an addendum to the contract from December of 1928. Harleen was underage, so she had to have a legal guardian on the set with her at all times. Of course, that would be her mother. She studied with Laurel and Hardy. She learned comic timing from Stan Laurel, and she always thanked him for her success in comedy afterwards. She did a series of short films with him, and in the March 1929 standard casting directory, Harleen appears now with her mother's name, Jean Harlow. She's on her way. No sooner is she on her way, it all comes to a halt. On March 2nd, 1929, Hal Roach releases her from her contract, and she told him that her movie career was ruining her marriage, so he let her go. Well, obviously, she didn't give up. Next thing she does is she does a semi-nude photo shoot in Griffith Park by Edwin Bauer Hesser. And starlets would often go to him and have these photographs taken, which then, get distributed to producers and executives in the film business. You're going to get a call. Obviously, her husband is not behind this. This is her mother pushing the boundaries. She gets her first speaking part in a Clara Bow movie at Paramount called Saturday Night Kid. Initially, Clara does not like this girl. That hair, that loose bosom. She just said, "Who's going to look at me on the screen with her?" But she eventually found out that Harleen was just a very warm, unassuming girl. She embraced her and even put her in publicity photographs with her. One of the other actors in the film was James Hall, who began dating Harleen at this time because her marriage is faltering. And he's working on Hell's Angels with Howard Hughes. This is a movie that has been going on for years. It ultimately cost $4 million to make, and they are now reconverting to sound. Their lead actress, Greta Nissen, is Swedish with a heavy accent, and she's tired of waiting around, so she accepts a Broadway show in New York. And Howard Hughes decides, I'm just going to recast her. I'm going to find an unknown who will fill the bill. James Hall thought that Harleen / Jean Harlow was the one who could do it. This is her hair and makeup test. And her character in the movie's name is Helen, and she's the girl that comes between two brothers. Howard Hughes needed someone who, the minute you saw her, you would know, they would come to blows over this girl. The character was, just a terrible, terrible girl who had no conscience. She split these brothers up, couldn't care less. She did it just for fun. Her character is somebody who enjoyed sex for sex. She didn't need an emotional connection. Unfortunately, the public bought that, and Jean Harlow was confused with that character for almost the rest of her life. Hell's Angels was the biggest premiere in Hollywood ever. This is Grauman's Chinese Theater in May 1930, and you can see that there are these life-size airplanes strung above the traffic all the way down the street. There are planes flying overhead, there's searchlights, there's movie stars, and in the center of it is Jean Harlow. In the beginning, the movie is listed as Hell's Angels with Ben Lyne, James Hall, and Jean Harlow. By the second month, it's Hell's Angels with Jean Harlow, Ben Lyne, and James Hall. She has exploded in public consciousness. This is a picture of Harlow at the premiere. Howard Hughes wanted to lighten her hair and start a publicity campaign with it, and so they invented the term platinum blonde. You know, the most expensive alloy you can find, platinum. And that was the idea, was that she was the highest caliber of blonde you could possibly be. She dressed all in white, which was her own personal thing. She preferred white. She wore all these, everybody who gave her an orchid that night, she wore them all over her opera coat. And on the left screen is her escort that evening, apart from her parents, an MGM executive, Paul Byrne. He had once turned her down for some bit part work in an MGM film because he said that her face was too modern and the film was a period piece. But they struck up friendship, and he's someone who always was out there trying to help starlets who were struggling and not doing very well in the business. He was friends with Barbara Lamar, he helped Joe Crawford, he got all these people, lifted them up from the lower ranks up to stardom. He believed in Jean Harlow when she didn't even believe in herself. But she had this quality on film that just stood out, and she just had this incandescent quality. This is how she saw herself on film. All these curves that she doesn't want them to be where they are, so she's kind of embarrassed by what she sees. Howard Hughes doesn't have the next film for Jean Harlow. Instead, he sends her out on personal appearance tours all over the country. Any place that Hell's Angels would premiere, he would send her. Paul Byrne ultimately comes to her rescue, and he convinces Howard Hughes to loan her out, and figures out he can make a couple of $1,000s a week off her and just give her $150 a week. So in January of 1931, Howard Hughes loans her out to MGM for The Secret Six with a newcomer, Clark Gable and Wallace Beery. This is the first pairing of Gable and Harlow together, and even though they're second leads, there's chemistry between them already.
Who's the woman on the right?
I'm so glad you asked that. The woman on the right, her name's Mary Carlyle. She was a bit player at MGM. She started in 1929, and she's still alive. She's 99 years old, and she talk. She doesn't want to talk publicly, but if you talk to her one-on-one, she won't shut up. So it's just that crazy thing. I find it so fascinating because it's such an insight into the way Hollywood used to be in stardom, because she says, I can't do that. That's egotistical. I wouldn't do that. You're an actor. Actors are hands. No. You don't do stuff like that. But she'll sit down and she'll tell you amazing stories.
We'll like her, and you can just talk to her in front of all of us.
Well, she tells great stories, so there's got to be a way. What's that?
Her and Bing Crosby did.
Her and Bing Crosby did 3 films together. She was his love interest in 3 films. She's also in Grand Hotel. She's the bride that arrives as Garbo leaves. And she remembers that very well. I asked Mary Carlyle about this photograph. And I said, so were you guys really playing cards? And she goes, no, that was just publicity stuff. They just stuck the cards in my hands. I didn't even know Wallace Beery. So it's interesting to see the behind-the-scenes machinations. So, I actually interviewed Mary Carlyle for the book, and she really gave me an understanding of what Hollywood was like in the 30s. And it's, the business was so different back then than it is now. Everybody knew each other. It was such a mom and pop kind of organization, like a cottage industry that just blew up over the decades. So Harlow continued in 1931 to make movie after movie, and this photo pretty much sums up her career in 1931. She's the first screen character who's called a tramp on screen. She's undressed like this through most of her films in 1931, and she plays despicable, unsympathetic characters, what she described as sex vultures. And the unfortunate thing was, in her personal life, people confused her with these characters, and she said that they all treated her like she was a bitch in heat. And this is the price of being a sex symbol. That's how you get treated personally. Of course, you can go and cry in your beautiful mansion. Being a movie star has its perks, and Harlow and her family rented this Tudor mansion on Clubview Drive, just Beverly Hills adjacent. The house is still there. Looks exactly the same. It's owned by a doctor and his wife, the nicest people in the world. I've known them for over 10 years now. And they really embrace the idea that a movie star used to live in their home. And they actually said to me one time, can we do some kind of party for Jean Harlow, just for good karma, for whatever reason? And we did. It was terrific. So, as you can see, it's exactly the same. The only thing different in the house are the kitchens and bathrooms. Those things always get remodeled. It's a gorgeous house. Isn't this a nice, romantic picture of a clinch? You know, loving couple, and it would be if it wasn't her stepfather. This is really inappropriate. When I found this photograph, I'm like, you know, this is talk about hands-on. That's my joke. So, but you know, this really shows you the relationship between Marino and Jean Harlow. And while she is complying, you can also see in her body language that from her hips back, she's still pushing back. But okay, there needs to be some distance between us. He took over as the manager of her career, and he is somebody who I would characterize as somebody who possessed women. He lived off women, and he didn't seem to have a problem with that. So he managed her career, and she always made sure that she kept 1 foot ahead of him. She didn't quite trust him. Not that anything happened, but she never quite trusted this guy. Paul Byrne was, I'm going to tell you one more thing. So Marino and her agent Arthur Landau figured out that Harlow could go on a personal appearance tour back east. They could charge $6,000 a week, and they could cut out the middleman, not do it through Howard Hughes. So they signed her to a 6-week tour back east through Chicago and New York, which eventually turned into 3 months. That's a lot of money. Howard Hughes was livid, so he sends her a check for $8,500 to make up for, the lapse of giving her money for the last year. So she mailed it back to him and never talked to him again. Meanwhile, in Hollywood, Paul Byrne is working behind the scenes at MGM trying to find a place for Harlow at the studio. This is who he knows her to be. Somebody who's fun-loving and playful, something that had not been seen on the screen yet. Meanwhile, Harlow is back east, and with the help of radio announcer Nils Bransland, if I'm saying that correctly, he wrote new material for her. She started to get polished on stage, doing personal appearance tours, and she took off. This crowd waiting to see her. Marino would send Western Union telegrams to Louis B. Mayer all the time, giving him the numbers, the money that was made, all this stuff. And finally, on March 3rd, 1932, Harlene's 21st birthday, she got a call from Irving Thalberg that they had bought her Hughes contract for $30,000, which Hughes would say was $60,000. And she had a 7-year contract with MGM. Please come and join us as quickly as possible. So in April 1932, she became one of the contract players at Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, more stars than there are in heaven. This is one of my favorite pictures of Jean Harlow. She's just freshly on the lot. She's so happy, triumphant. This is a triumphant moment for her. Everything good should happen to her from here. First order of business is that she is the star of a movie called Redheaded Woman, which is a popular serial in the Saturday Evening Post. So the challenge here is that Harlow's platinum blonde hair would be disguised by a red wig, and she would have to win over audiences by her own acting power. And what's amazing about this film is if you see anything of her before this and then you see this film, this is a girl attacking this role. She just is so committed. It's absolutely amazing. Where was this girl all those years? She's a huge sensation. On April 29th, 1932, MGM rolls out Grand Hotel at Brown's Chinese Theater, and Paul Byrne escorts Jean Harlow to the premiere. This is her first public outing. She wears the red wig, and people are craning their heads trying to figure out who is that girl with Paul Byrne. The other brings young Scarlet. When they realize it's Jean Harlow in a wig, they all laugh, and she steals she steals the show for a few minutes. Everyone at the premiere signed a dummied up ledger of the Grand Hotel. Ledger and signed in. Oops, I did something. I hope I didn't do anything. Here's the actual ledger. I own it. I am saving Hollywood history. So,
Where did you get that, Darrell?
What's that?
Where did you get that?
It was at Butterfields and Butterfields, and I didn't get it because I thought we'd go for a fortune, and it didn't, and I'm like, ugh. And then about 5 years later, it came into my circle again, and this time, get it. So I did. So Jean Harlow's signature is the 8 from the top, followed by Paul Byrne. Then there's a space, which used to have Chester Morris's signature, but the previous owner had this cleaned, and it wiped his name off. Wow. So no more cleaning. What's interesting about this signature is Jean Harlow had very much of a childlike scrawl, and this is so neat and measured. And I always imagined, she's just been signed by MGM, she's out in public, she's with Paul Byrne, she wants to, present the best side of herself, so she's trying to write really well. That's what I imagined. No. As she said in the newsreel, which I found out a year later, I can't write with gloves on. That's all it was. Wah, wah. So, Paul Byrne, the Svengali, has turned Jean Harlow, the girl whose career was languishing in sex vulture roles, into a major movie star, and the only thing left to do is to propose marriage. So on June 21st, they went down to City Hall and registered their intent to marry. Then they went back to MGM and had these photographs taken, their official engagement portraits, in front of the executive bungalow on the lot, which still exists to this day. I don't know if anyone's been over at Sony, old MGM lot. This is now production offices. But back then it was where you would have executive luncheons. Any dignitaries that visited would appear at this, would go to this building. And the steps are the same, the doors the same, the only thing that's changed are the lights on the side. So on July 2nd, 1932, Jean Harlow married Paul Byrne. He was 42, she was 21. They got married in the living room of her Clubview Drive house. And here's a picture of the wedding party, her family members, his family members. And what's interesting to see here is she holds her husband's hand. Her other hand is holding the hand of her cousin, Donald Robertson. And this again just shows you the closeness that she has with her own family. They were the same age, even though he was technically her mother's cousin. Her great Aunt Jetty, who's the lady on the left, lived in Long Beach. So when the Harlows first moved there in the 20s, Aunt Jetty was already there. They always had family in Los Angeles. And so Harleen and Donald had kind of grown up together. For a wedding present, Paul Byrne gave Jean Harlow the deed to his property, which is this 1930 sort of German hunting lodge home up in Benedict Canyon. And I've been to the house. It's absolutely charming. It's like such a great storybook house, very sweet, and it's even got a turret on the side, and there's a circular dining room in there. Who knew? So Harlow is very happy. She is now the wife of an MGM executive. She's going to get major roles now. The things that Norma Shearer says no to, and Joan Crawford says no to, and Brett Garber says no to, are going to go to Harlow next. This is her maid, Blanche Williams, who came to her during Hell's Angels and basically said, "You need a maid, I'm going to be your maid." And she was with her for 7 years. On the morning after Harlow's wedding night, Blanche was there, and I'm not sure how many people are familiar with the Irving Shulman book about Jean Harlow that talks about the wedding night. She's beaten and all this stuff by Paul Byrne. It's just total bullshit. Not true. Because Blanche was there. Paul Byrne came out of the bedroom in the morning. They'd gone to bed at 3 o'clock in the morning. They got up at 7. He comes out and he sees Blanche, and what does he tell her? He says, "Oh, the baby's still a virgin." Goes back in the room, and she just goes, "Does he think I'm dumb? She was married before. Of course she's not a virgin." But it tells you something about Paul Byrne and Jean Harlow.
Darrell, we have about 10 minutes left. I
Let's
don't.
do
I
this.
want to make sure there's
Good.
time for
Okay.
the inevitable.
I
We
will.
all know it's coming.
Great, thank you. Okay, so they, for all intents and purposes, they seem like they're in a very happy relationship. He does things like has this mural painted for her and installed in their home in Benedict Canyon, and here it is. It still exists.
Is it still in the house?
It's not in the house. It hasn't been in the house for 70 years, but I own it now. And I took it back to the house in the fall. I took Mary Carlyle and I took the mural and I brought them both to the house. It was very magical. Anyway, Harlow starts in Red Dust with Clark Gable, and it's her next major hit. It seems like nothing can stop her career, except on Labor Day weekend, Paul Byrne's nude body is found with a bullet in his head in the change room off their bedroom. Their butler, John Carmichael, found him. Did he kill himself? Did someone kill him? Where's Jean Harlow? And bedlam erupts. MGM goes into overdrive. This is Louis B. Mayer and Irving Thalberg. They have to go into damage control. What happened? We got to get it. We have to make sure that we protect our assets. Paul Byrne's dead. We'll blame everything on him. Harlow's alive. We got to save her. We've got this major investment. So they put out a story that Paul Byrne was impotent and killed himself because he couldn't satisfy his sex symbol wife. Harlow denied this completely. She stood by her man even in death. And this is a great photograph of all these newspaper men pointing at the bedroom windows. The police didn't get called for about 3 hours after Louis B. Mayer and Thalberg were at the house. They figured out what they were going to do. And it makes sense if you're a corporation, you're going to protect yourselves.
Can I interrupt you for a second?
Yes.
Motion picture companies had sworn law enforcement agencies. I don't just mean private detectives. They were sworn officers in the state of California. It wasn't just like private detectives. Policemen, sworn. Like, to shoot someone and not get a civil suit because they're in the line of duty. Really, really interesting. Okay, so these were, yeah.
So Louis B. Mayer produced this note, which he said was a suicide note. Dearest dear, unfortunately, this is the only way to make good the frightful wrong I have done you, and to wipe out my abject humiliation. I love you. And the postscript says, you understand that last night was only a comedy. And, you know, people go back and forth. Is this a suicide note? Is this a note that he wrote earlier for some other, you know, minor indiscretion which Louis B. Mayer used as a suicide note so that he could present his version of the story? And unfortunately, he puts her at the scene of the crime if this is a fake note, which is just ridiculous. So I have a hard time believing that. Newspaper reporters, you know, camped out over in front of Clubview Drive waiting for Harlow to appear, and 2 days later she heads off to Paul Byrne's funeral. And this is Grace Chapel in Inglewood Park Cemetery. The chapel is still there, and it was complete bedlam, as you can see that day. Harlow was vilified. At this point, people didn't know, did she kill her husband? And MGM's trying to sweep it under the rug. You can't tell what's going on. It's all over the papers, and it's just a big mess, and MGM is pushing this impotent story. Jean Harlow is denying it. Paul Byrne's brother flies in from back east and says Paul Byrne had a common law wife, and she's somewhere in California. Where is she? That's something MGM doesn't expect. And so now you have two scenarios going on, and it really all just comes down to this woman, Dorothy Millett, who Paul Byrne lived with for 5 years in New York between 1950 and 1920. She had a breakdown as was institutionalized and was never the same again. So he put her in the Algonquin Hotel, paid her bills, and he moved to Hollywood and started a new life. Ironically, in 1932, she decides to go to Los Angeles. Why? The gods conspire, who can say? She was there the night that Paul Byrne died. So whether she shot him in a fit of rage, she was a religious nut, or she threatened him and left, and he realized that he had, hang on one second, he had put Jean Harlow, somebody who he had resurrected, now found out that he put her in this compromising situation. The only way to do it was to remove himself. That's what I think, but you know, it's up for grabs till we learn more. Dorothy Millett. Harlow couldn't just stay at home. And she was going crazy, listening to her mother going crazy. You know, her mother was going berserk. You know, our career is over. It's just all over. So she called Oliver. She goes back to MGM, and this is the first scene that she shot, swimming nude in a rain barrel. On October 19th, she goes to the reading of the will, where she finds out that Paul Byrne's estate is insolvent, and she spends the next 5 years paying off his debts. MGM promotes Red Dust. Harlow is forgiven for what has transpired, and once everyone finds out about Dorothy Millette, who then committed suicide 3 days later, drowning herself in the Sacramento River. Harlow is seen as the unwitting victim in this three-way, and she's ultimately forgiven, and now she eclipses everyone and becomes a major star at MGM. She can't work for a couple of months because she has to be a widow, wear widow's weeds, so MGM has her, you know, do sports, do charity work. She builds a house, she buys a new car, she goes on vacations, and it isn't until March of 1933 that she begins to be seen publicly again.
Is that the Coconut?
The Coconut Grove, right there, one of her favorite places to go, and we all know it's not there anymore, unfortunately.
Darrell, maybe we should stop there and have a couple minutes for questions.
Sure, is that good with everyone?
Thank you for getting us through the murder or suicide.
You're welcome, you're welcome. Any questions? Okay, well, let me just tell you in a nutshell. So Harlow stayed a major star at MGM for the next 5 years. The glomerulonephritis continued to fester in her system. In 1936, she kept on getting sick. She'd get a sunburn. The doctor told her, you can't go out in the sun anymore. You're allergic to the sun. Every illness that she got was just depleting her system. In February 1937, she had dental surgery. She had her wisdom teeth taken out. She went out on the table, and they had to bring her back. She recuperated, spent 2 weeks in the hospital, goes right into Saratoga at MGM, still having pus coming out of her gums while she's filming. On May 29th, that's her last day at the studio. She passed out in the middle of a scene with Walter Pidgeon, goes home, and a week later she's dead. As far as the public knows, this perfectly healthy girl died, and they don't know why. And so, you know, rumors are rampant. But the truth is that her kidneys failed, and there's a lot of complicating pieces to it. But she was a girl who needed kidney dialysis or transplant in a generation when that didn't exist. So it's a loss to all of us. 26 when she died. But she left this incredible legacy, and every blonde in Hollywood that could do comedy or had a sexy wiggle was compared to her, and ultimately Marilyn Monroe is the one who took over that crown. Questions? And she's taking notes, so that's good. Okay, well, that's it.
Oh, okay. Thank you. We're going to take a break. We're going to take about a 10-15 minute break. Mark, but don't get up yet. Really quickly, Mark, come here. Okay. Mark is going to talk after our 10-15 minute break. You're going to talk about James Oviatt. Right. Okay. Darrell, you're here. James Oviatt. You'll find out. James Oviatt. Darrell, you're right here. You have books. If people want to buy them, you're right here. See you in 10-15 minutes. Go get an espresso. Ask questions. Okay. Good job. I took your chair. You didn't.